Hello, friend. Tonight, I'll tell you a quiet story about clothes, about how something so simple, something we wear every day, began with a single boy who felt the cold differently. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a golden sunset spilling over grass huts. This is Riverbend, a village nestled where two rivers kiss. 10,000 years ago, our ancestors lived here. They walked barefoot on warm earth. They bathed in shallow, singing rivers. Their skin knew only sun and wind and rain. It was how life had always been. In this village lived a boy named Kale. He was 16 summers old, with eyes the color of wet river stones and hands already strong from hunting. Every morning, Kale would rise before the birds. He'd check his snares along the forest edge, listening to the rustle of willow branches. He'd return with rabbits or fish, sharing every bite with his little sister, Lyra. She was 8 years old, all laughter and quick feet. Kale loved how she'd splash in the river at dusk, her small body gleaming under the fading light. The whole village moved like this, easy, natural, connected to the earth like roots to a tree. People believed covering the skin was wrong. It hid the truth of who they were. It insulted the sky spirits. So they wore nothing but dust and sweat and sunlight. Kale never questioned it. Why would he? The days were warm. The nights were soft. Life flowed like the river. But on this evening, something shifted. Kale sat by the fire, watching Lyra trace shapes in the dirt. The smoke from the flames didn't rise straight and tall as it usually did. Instead, it curled low and restless, like a snake coiling around the huts. A shiver moved through Kale, not from the air, but deeper. He felt a whisper in his bones. This cold is new. This cold has teeth. He didn't know it yet, but that whisper was the first thread of a story that would wrap around the world. And it began with a boy who noticed what no one else could feel. Dawn painted the sky pink over Riverbend. Kale woke to the familiar rhythm of his world. He checked his snares first. Empty again. The deer had grown scarce. He moved quietly through the tall grass, bare feet silent on damp earth. By mid-morning, he traded herbs with Old Man Torin for 2 fat fish. They shared a meal by the riverbank, laughing as Lyra tried to catch dragonflies. Life here was simple. The sun warmed their skin. The river cooled their thirst. No one questioned the old ways. That afternoon, Kale watched Lyra playing with other children in the shallows. Sunlight danced on the water. Their voices rose like birdsong, pure and easy. Lyra ducked under a ripple, then popped up giggling, droplets sparkling on her shoulders. Kale smiled. This was how it should be. Safe, natural. But the wind changed just before sunset. A sharp, bitter cold slithered through the valley, unnatural for the season. Kale frowned. Frost glittered on the reeds. The river's song turned thin and brittle. Lyra shivered as she stepped onto the bank, her small body trembling. "It's so cold, Kale," she whispered, hugging herself. He rubbed her arms, trying to warm her. Her teeth chattered like stones knocking together. At the evening fire, Lyra huddled close to Kale. She ate little. Her usual bright chatter faded to tired silence. Villagers noticed the frost too. They pulled closer to flames, murmuring about strange weather. "The sky spirits are restless," Elder Mara said, her voice low and serious. She tossed dried herbs into the fire. The smoke curled upward, but it couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. Kale wrapped his arms around Lyra, feeling her shivers deepen. He remembered the soft deer pelts from last week's hunt, drying on sun-warmed rocks near his hut. What if the thought startled him? Covering the body was forbidden, but Lyra's small frame trembled against his chest. Her breath came quick and shallow. He looked at her face in the firelight. Her lips had lost their color. That night, as the cold wind howled through the grass roofs, Kale made his first quiet rebellion. He slipped away to the rocks. He took one small pelt, soft as dandelion fluff, and draped it over Lyra while she slept. For a moment, her shivering slowed. Her breathing deepened. Relief washed over Kale like warm water. But then Mara's voice cut through the darkness. "Kale." She stood at the hut's entrance, her face shadowed by firelight. "What have you done?" Her eyes fixed on the pelt. "This breaks our oldest law." Kale's heart hammered. He opened his mouth to explain about the cold, about Lyra's feverish skin, but the words froze in his throat. As Lyra's shivers deepened into fever that night, Kale realized their way of life had a hidden weakness no one had named, and the cold wind whispering through the village wasn't just in the air, it was in their bones. Kale's hands wouldn't stay still. All next morning, while Lyra tossed in feverish sleep, he gathered river reeds. He wove them tightly, fingers clumsy with worry. If I make it thick enough, strong enough, the reeds snapped like dried twigs. His first blanket crumbled before he could even drape it over Lyra's small frame. She whimpered, curling tighter into herself. The cold wind howled through the cracks in their hut, mocking his effort. By afternoon, Kale remembered the deer pelts drying on sun-warmed rocks near his hut. Soft, warm, alive with the memory of the hunt. He carried one back, his heart pounding like a trapped bird. He spread it gently over Lyra. Her shivering slowed. Her breathing deepened. A fragile peace settled over her face. Kale touched her forehead. Cool now, not burning. Relief flooded him, warm as honey. This isn't wrong, he thought. This is care. Real care. But Elder Mara found them at dusk. She stood in the hut's doorway, her shadow stretching long and thin across the floor. Her eyes locked onto the pelt covering Lyra. Kale, she said, her voice sharp as flint. Remove it. Now. She stepped closer, her staff tapping the earth like a warning drum. The sky spirits gave a skin to breathe freely. To cover it is to spit in their faces. It invites their anger. Kale's throat tightened. He wanted to say, Lyra was dying. The cold has teeth. But Mara's gaze was stone. Look at her, Elder, Kale whispered. She's resting. She's warm. Mara's knuckles whitened on her staff. Warmth without truth is poison. This pelt steals her spirit's breath. Take it off, or I will. Her words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Kale's fingers trembled as he peeled the pelt away. Lyra stirred, a small cry escaping her lips. Kale watched her color fade again, her breath turning shallow. A quiet rage burned in his chest. If the spirits demand suffering, are they truly kind? That night, Kale sat by the fire, staring at the flames. The village slept under a blanket of stars. But Lyra's breathing grew thin and fast again. Mara's warning echoed. Break our law, and you break Riverbend. Outside, the unnatural wind shrieked, tearing at the grass roofs. Kale looked at his sister's pale face in the firelight. He looked at the pile of soft pelts in the corner. The choice wasn't in his mind anymore. It was in his bones. He wrapped Lyra in 3 thick pelts. He tucked them tight around her small frame, ignoring the voice in his head that sounded like Mara's. He watched her chest rise and fall, steady and deep. For the first time in days, she slept peacefully. Dawn was still hours away when Kale heard footsteps. Mara stood at the entrance, her face unreadable in the dark. She saw the pelts. She saw Lyra's calm face. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked away toward the council fire. Kale obeyed Mara that night, but as Lyra's breathing grew shallow again after he removed the pelts, he knew he would break the rules again before dawn. And this time he wouldn't hide. The moon hung low that night, a shard of bone-white light cutting through the cold. Kale didn't sleep. He watched Lyra's chest rise and fall beneath the 3 thick pelts he'd wrapped around her. Her cheeks had warmth again. Her breathing was deep and steady. Outside, the wind screamed like a wounded animal, rattling the grass walls of their hut. Kale knew Mara would come at dawn. He also knew he wouldn't remove the pelts this time. When the first gray light touched the river, footsteps crunched on frozen earth. Mara stood at the doorway, her face sharp with grief. Behind her stood 4 village elders. Their eyes held no anger now, only sorrow. Kale, Mara said, her voice raw, you break our oldest law. You shame the spirits who gave us life. She pointed to the pelts covering Lyra. This is not care. This is fear. Fear makes us hide from the truth of our skin. Kale stood slowly. He met Mara's eyes. Lyra was dying, Elder. The cold has teeth. These pelts, they held life in. He touched Lyra's shoulder gently. This is truth. The truth that we protect each other. Mara's shoulder sagged. For a heartbeat, Kale saw tears in her eyes. Then her staff slammed against the hut floor. Thud, thud, thud. Riverbend cannot survive your truth, she whispered. Take your pelts. Take your fire. Leave before the sun warms the stones. Silence fell. Heavy, final. Cale packed quickly: dried meat, a water pouch, his hunting knife. He bundled the precious pelts in strong river reeds. Lyra woke as he tied the last knot. Her small hand grabbed his wrist. "Don't go," she breathed. Cale knelt, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'll keep you warm from afar," he promised. He tucked a smooth river stone into her palm, the one she'd given him when she was 5. "Remember this warmth," he whispered. He stepped outside. The entire village stood in the icy dawn, wrapped in nothing but breath clouds and silence. No one met his eyes. No one spoke. Cale walked past the sacred fire pit, past the grinding stones, past the river where Lyra had splashed just days ago. At the village gate, a simple arch of woven branches, Mara waited. She didn't look at him. She placed a small pouch of herbs in his hand. "For the fever you'll catch in the wilderness," she muttered. Then she closed the gate behind him with a soft click. Cale didn't turn back. He walked north, toward the dark forest. The pelts on his back felt like Lyra's small hand, holding his. The rough rope bit into his shoulder. Tears froze on his cheeks, but his jaw stayed set. He was 16 summers old. He had no home. He had only these skins and the quiet certainty that warmth of care mattered more than ancient rules. The wind howled louder as he entered the trees. Somewhere deep in the shadows, a wolf cried. Cale tightened his grip on his knife. He didn't know that 3 days later, he'd find a woman bleeding under a fallen pine tree, and that her name, Ilera, would stitch itself into the very fabric of human history. Alone on the forest path, Cale didn't know that his exile would lead him to a stranger whose life, and all our lives, would be forever changed by cloth. The wilderness tested Cale like a strict teacher. On his second day alone, the sky cracked open. Snow needled his skin, sharp and relentless. Wind howled through the pines, tearing at his bare shoulders. Cale stumbled into a shallow cave, his fingers numb. "I won't last a night," he thought, teeth chattering. Then he remembered the pelts. He draped them over his body like a living blanket. The rough deer hide trapped his breath, turning it to warm mist. The cold wind still screamed outside, but here, pressed against earth and fur, he felt the warmth of care again, not just for Lyra, for himself. By dawn, the storm had stolen his water pouch. Hunger gnawed his belly as he followed a frozen stream. That's when he heard it, a low, pain cry. Beneath a fallen pine tree lay a woman, her leg pinned by a branch. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes held fire. "Help me," she rasped. Cale heaved the branch aside. He recognized her, Ilera, a trader from the northern villages. She'd visited Riverbend once, trading obsidian blades for honey. Now she glared at his pelts. "You dress like an animal," she muttered, though her voice lacked strength. Cale ignored her. He wrapped her injured leg in soft moss, then layered pelts over her shaking body. "Why?" she whispered. "Tradition says skin must breathe." Cale met her eyes. "Tradition won't keep you alive tonight." For 3 days, Cale cared for Lara. He melted snow for water. He shared his last dried fish. Slowly, her skepticism softened. One evening, as he mended a tear in a pelt with sinew thread, she laughed, a dry, crackling sound. "You stitch like my grandmother," she said. She used grass cords. Said bare skin invites the night's teeth. Cale's hand stilled. Someone else knew this truth. Hope flickered in his chest. But the wilderness wasn't done with them. On the 4th morning, as they limped toward Alara's village, shouts erupted from the trees. 3 bandits emerged, stone knives glinting. "Your pelts," one growled. "Give them." Now, Cale stepped in front of Alara, his own knife raised. The bandits lunged. In the scramble, Alara tripped. Cale threw his arm out, cushioning her fall with a folded pelt. The bandit's knife slashed Cale's shoulder, a hot line of fire. But Alara was safe. The bandits fled when Cale roared like a wounded bear, clutching his bleeding arm. Alara pressed moss to his wound, her hands steady. "You use cloth as armor," she murmured. "Not just for warmth." Cale nodded weakly. Blood seeped through his fingers. That night, under a sky littered with stars, Alara shared a story. Her people also feared covering skin, but her grandmother had hidden woven grass pads in her hut for sick children, for elders in winter. "Fear," Alara said quietly, Makes us forget what love remembers. At sunrise, Alara pointed to thin smoke curling above distant hills. Stonehaven, she said. My village. They have children shivering in this cold. They need what you carry. Cale touched the pelts on his back. They felt heavier now, alive with purpose. But as they neared the first huts, he saw faces hardening. Women pulled children inside. Men gripped spears. Whispers slithered on the cold wind. Covered flesh. Broken law. When Alara pointed to her distant village's smoke on the horizon, she whispered, They need what you carry. But Cale couldn't guess how fiercely they would resist it. Stonehaven Square was chaos. A blizzard had swallowed the village. Snow like shattered glass stung Cale's eyes. Elders huddled under woven grass awnings, their faces tight with fear. Children whimpered, their bare arms goose-pimpled and blue. When Cale arrived with Alara, he saw a small boy collapse near the central fire, his lips pale as river stones. A woman sobbed over him. He won't wake up, she gasped. The cold took him. Cale didn't hesitate. He dropped his pack and pulled out the softest deer pelt. Villagers gasped as he knelt beside the boy. Covering steals the spirit's breath. An elder shouted. Cale ignored him. He wrapped the pelt gently around the child's shivering body, tucking it beneath his chin. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a small sigh. The boy's eyelids fluttered. Color seeped back into his lips. The mother clutched Cale's arm, tears melting tracks through the snow on her cheeks. Warmth of care, Cale whispered. Not hiding, holding. But the moment shattered. Mara stepped from the crowd. She'd followed Cale's trail through the storm. Her staff slammed against the ice. Crack, you poison them with lies, she roared, pointing at the wrapped child. This boy's spirit is trapped. Can't you feel it? She turned to the villagers, her voice raw. This outcast breaks sacred laws. He brings the sky's anger upon us all. Snow clung to her white hair like frozen tears. Cale stood slowly, his wounded shoulder throbbing. The crowd pressed closer, murmurs rising like angry bees. Some held spears. Others clutched their children tighter. Alara limped forward, shielding Cale. He saved my life. He saved this boy. But Mara's glare silenced her. Prove it doesn't curse us, Mara challenged, jabbing her staff toward the fire. Wrap yourself in that fur. Stand in the coldest wind. If you live through the night, we'll believe your care. Cale's breath hitched. He remembered Lyra's feverish face. He thought of the pelts that held life in during the cave storm. This isn't about cloth, he realized. It's about choosing care over fear, even when it costs everything. He met Mara's eyes. I'll stand in the wind, he said quietly, but not alone. He looked at the mother holding her revived son. Your boy needs this warmth too. Let him keep the pelt. Mara's face hardened. She raised her staff high, a signal for banishment. You defy the spirits, she cried. You are no longer welcome in any village of the free-skinned. Snow swirled around her like a ghostly cloak. The crowd parted, leaving Cale standing alone in the storm, the child safe at his feet. As Mara raised her hand to banish Cale forever, a familiar voice cut through the howling wind and the crowd's murmurs. Wait! It was a small voice, trembling but fierce. He saved my life too. Cale's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He turned slowly toward the village gate. Standing there, wrapped head to toe in thick, mismatched pelts, was Lyra. Her small hand gripped a walking stick. Her eyes, what with snow or tears, locked onto Cale's. Behind her stood half of Riverbend's villagers, their faces pale but determined. They too wore scraps of hide and woven grass. The wind whipped Lyra's cloak, but she didn't shiver. She took one step forward, then another, her voice ringing clear above the storm. My brother didn't break the law. He remembered it. Lyra's voice cut through the blizzard like sunlight through storm clouds. She stepped forward, the pelts wrapped around her small frame rustling like dry leaves. Snow dusted her dark hair, but her cheeks glowed warm. Behind her, Riverbend villagers emerged from the trees, men, women, even children, each draped in scraps of hide, woven grass, or bundled moss. Their faces held no shame, only quiet defiance. Mara's staff clattered to the ice. Her eyes widened at Lyra, then at the villagers. You all broke the law? Her voice cracked. Cale ran to his sister, dropping to his knees. He touched her hands. They were warm beneath the pelt sleeves. "How did you find me?" he whispered. Lyra smiled faintly. "Mara's banishment was meant to protect you. But when I woke alone, I knew you'd gone where the cold bites hardest. These," she tugged the pelts, "kept me alive on the trail, just like yours kept me alive." She turned to the crowd, her small voice steady. "In Riverbend, Elder Mara says coverings steal our spirits. But when Kale left, I remembered grandmother's stories. She told me how her mother wove grass mats for sick children during the Great Frost. Mara's own mother." A gasp rippled to the villagers. Mara stumbled back as if struck. Her shoulders shook, not from cold, from tears. She did. Mara choked out. "My mother," she hid those woven mats under her sleeping furs. She said, "Fear made the elders forbid them, but love remembers." Mara sank to her knees in the snow. "I was 10 when the sickness took her. I buried her words with her. I thought covering skin was weakness." She looked at Kale, truly seeing him for the first time. "But you weren't hiding, boy. You were holding." The blizzard softened. Snowflakes fell gently now like feathers. The child wrapped in Kale's pelt stirred, blinking awake. His mother pressed her forehead to his, sobbing with relief. Slowly, villagers began to move. A woman knelt beside Mara, draping a grass-woven shawl over her trembling shoulders. Another handed Kale a cup of hot broth. Ilera limped to Lyra, wrapping her in a heavier bear pelt. "Your brother's right," she murmured. "This isn't about skin. It's about this." She placed her hand over her own heart. By dawn, the storm had passed. In Stonehaven Square, fires burned bright. Villagers from both tribes sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing tools and stories. Kale showed them how to soften hides with fat and smoke. Elder women demonstrated grass-weaving techniques, their fingers flying like birds. Children giggled as they tied pelts around their waists like kilts. Mara worked quietly beside them, teaching how to stitch seams with sinew thread. Her eyes met Kale's across the fire. No words were needed, only a slow, soft nod. As the sun rose, painting the melting snow gold, Kale understood the truth. Clothes weren't born from vanity or shame. They came from a sister's shivers, a grandmother's hidden mats, a boy who chose care over fear in a moonlit hut. The first cloth was woven not to cover the body, but to hold life close when the world turned cruel. And that's why, even today, when you pull on a sweater or wrap yourself in a blanket, you carry a piece of Kale's courage. You were the warmth of care, the oldest language of love we humans ever learned. For in a world of cold winds, we discovered that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is cover each other. Long ago, in Riverbend Village, people wore no clothes. Their skin knew sun and wind and rain. This was tradition. This was truth. Kale lived here. He was 16. His little sister Lyra was 8. They were happy. But one day, the cold wind changed. It bit deeper. Frost glittered on the river reeds. Lyra shivered in the water. Her teeth chattered. That night, her fever burned hot. Kale felt helpless. The cold wind had teeth. Kale remembered soft ear pelts. He wrapped Lyra in one. She stopped shivering. She slept peacefully. But Elder Mara saw the pelt. "This breaks our law," she cried. "Covering skin insults the sky spirits." Kale had to choose, obey tradition, or save his sister. He chose Lyra. Elder Mara banished Kale. He left Riverbend alone. The cold wind followed him into the forest. Snow fell hard. Kale used pelts to stay warm. He saved a woman named Ilera. Her leg was hurt. He wrapped her in fur. She laughed weakly. "You stitch like my grandmother," she said. She had grass blankets for sick children. Kale and Ilera reached Stonehaven Village. A blizzard attacked. A small boy collapsed in the snow. Kale wrapped him in pelts. The boy woke up warm. But Elder Mara had followed Kale. She shouted, "This covering steals spirits." She raised her staff to banish him forever. Then a small voice. Lyra stood at the village gate. She wore pelts too. "He saved my life," she said. "Grandmother's mother used grass blankets long ago." Mara's face softened. She remembered her own mother's secret kindness. Tears fell. The cold wind faded. Villagers from Riverbend and Stonehaven worked together. They wove grass. They softened hides. They shared tools. They shared warmth. Mara taught them to stitch seams. Kale showed them how to smoke pelt soft. The warmth of care filled the square. I am Kale. I remember the cold wind. That night in Riverbend, I held my sister Lyra. Her skin burned. Her breath came fast. The cold wind howled through our hut. I felt helpless, like my hands were empty. I took a deer pelt, soft, warm. I wrapped it around Lyra. She stopped shaking. She slept deeply. I saw a peace on her face. That was the first time I felt the warmth of care. Real warmth, not just from fire, from choice. Elder Mara banished me. I left Riverbend at dawn. The cold wind bit my skin. I carried pelts on my back. Rough rope cut my shoulder. I walked alone for hours, days. The forest was silent. Only wind, only fear. I missed Lyra's laughter. Then I found Alara, hurt, bleeding, under a pine tree. She called my pelts animal dress. But I covered her anyway. She shivered less. One night, bandits attacked. I threw a pelt under her falling body. It cushioned her, saved her bones. She looked at me then, not with scorn, with wonder. "You use cloth as armor," she whispered. I nodded. My shoulder bled, but her hand was warm on my arm. In Stonehaven, the blizzard roared. A boy lay blue in the snow. I wrapped him in fur. His mother's tears melted the ice on her cheeks. Then Mara came. Her staff slammed down. Crack! I thought, this is the end. I stood alone in the storm. Cold wind filled my lungs. But then, a small voice. He saved my life too. I turned. Lyra stood there, wrapped in pelts. Snow in her hair, alive. She walked to me. I touched her hands. Warm, safe. She said, "You didn't break the law, brother. You remembered it." Mara wept. She spoke of her mother's secret grass blankets. Villagers shared tools, shared warmth. I showed them how to soften hides. Mara taught stitching. That night, fires burned bright. Children wore little pelts like kilts. They laughed. The cold wind faded. Now, when I see cloth, a blanket, a robe, a child's coat, I feel that first pelt on Lyra's shoulders. I smell smoke and wet fur. I hear Alara's dry laugh. I see Mara's tears on the snow. Clothes are not just skin coverings. They are hands holding each other in the dark. They are the warmth of care made visible. I am Kale, and this is how I learned. True strength isn't bearing the cold alone. It's having the courage to wrap someone else in your warmth. And so, friend, when you pull on your sweater tonight, or wrap yourself in a blanket, on a chilly evening, remember Kale's hands. Remember Lyra's smile under those rough deer pelts. Remember how warmth of care was born not in palaces or markets, but in a moonlit hut where a boy chose love over fear. Cloth has held us ever since. Through ice ages and migrations, through quiet winters and sudden storms. It carries the echo of that first choice, to cover not out of shame, but to hold life close. Here's the truth Kale taught us. True protection begins when we choose care over comfort. Piano swells softly, then softens. Fire crackles. Voice lowers to a whisper. If this story made your English feel warmer tonight, if you heard new words like frayed edges or bitter cold and understood them without effort, do me a small kindness. Tap the like button below. It helps others find these quiet stories for learning. And if you'd like to hear more tales where history lives in small moments, where rivers speak and firelight holds wisdom, subscribe. New stories come every Tuesday and Friday. Just gentle English, like a friend's voice in the dark. You can also listen again anytime. Shadow Kale's words. Feel the rhythm in your mouth. This story belongs to you now. Thank you for listening with your heart tonight. I'm here when you're ready for the next story. Until then, wrap yourself in kindness. And remember, you carry that ancient warmth inside you too.